What if the uniform meant to protect you became the reason you couldn't breathe? A routine traffic stop spirals, a black engineer, a nervous white officer, a drawn gun. Life or death until one twist changes everything. He's a Pentagon General. This isn't just a stop. It's a mirror. And America's watching. Will fear win again? Or will this near tragedy finally spark change? On a warm spring evening in Fairfax County, Virginia, dusk hugged the suburban streets in a gentle lavender haze. The second-story windows of neatly trimmed homes glowed softly, and the scent of freshly mown lawns lingered in the air like a promise of safety. Officer Mark Delaney eased his cruiser onto Poplar Ridge Drive, the red and blue lights dimmed. This was supposed to be another routine patrol, the kind that left officers bored and bored citizens relieved. James "Johnny" Holloway glanced in his rearview as the reflection of those lights fractured across his rear window. He pulled to the side, heart rate steady by habit, though a familiar nervous twinge flickered in his chest. He was a civilian engineer driving home from a client meeting, well-dressed in navy slacks and a crisp white shirt, but he was also a black man in America, and he knew how quickly calm could tip into catastrophe. Delaney walked up to the driver's side, his posture professional but rigid. The moonlight caught the gold badge on his chest, making it gleam like a promise. "Evening, sir. Do you know why I pulled you over?" Holloway turned off the engine, hands resting on the steering wheel. "Evening, officer. I might have drifted a tad over the speed limit. Sorry about that." His voice was soothing, practiced. He'd been through this before. Delaney studied him. Holloway was impeccably groomed, well-spoken, and calm, nothing like the stereotypes fed to Delaney in the academy. But implicit bias is not rational. It, like fear, blooms in the dark. "All right," Delaney said, reaching for his ticket book. Then he hesitated. Something in Holloway's steady gaze, perhaps the flash of tension in the man's eyes, set off a cascade of adrenaline in the officer's chest. A whisper, this man could be dangerous. Delaney's hand hovered not over his pad, but rather near the holster. "I need your license and registration," he said, voice firmer now. Holloway complied, sliding his wallet from the breast pocket. Each movement was slow and deliberate, because he knew any sudden motion could be misconstrued. Delaney watched, heart pounding as if Holloway were an unknown threat. The officer's fingers grazed his service pistol. He told himself he was preparing for the worst, a decision he'd defend later as officer safety. When Holloway handed over the documents, Delaney's pulse thudded in his ears. A flicker of panic. What if this man had a hidden weapon? What if he wasn't who he seemed? "Step out of the car," Delaney barked. Holloway's eyes widened, his calm unspooling. "Officer, may I ask why?" Delaney didn't answer. He drew his gun with a practiced motion, the metal barrel catching the streetlight. Hands on the trunk now, the click of Holloway's heart slamming against his ribs filled the silence. He did as instructed, leaning forward, fingertips skimming the cool metal. Fear anchored him in place, but anger roiled beneath his skin. Here he was, a decorated engineer, a pillar in his community, reduced to a suspect in seconds. He thought of his grandmother's words, "They won't believe you are harmless, no matter how polished you are." Yet he forced himself to breathe evenly. He had to stay alive. Delaney's finger trembled on the trigger. Behind his visor-lined helmet of authority, he felt small and exposed. Every statistic he'd memorized about assaults on officers, every cautionary tale, flooded his mind. But here was a perfect contradiction, a man who looked utterly harmless, yet his blackness transformed him into the archetype of a criminal threat. Holloway's voice, measured and calm despite his racing heart, cut through the tension. "Officer Delaney, my name is James Holloway. I'm a software engineer for a defense contractor. I have all my credentials, licensure, security clearance, right here." Delaney stiffened. He gripped the pistol tighter. The world narrowed to the gun, the car, the improbability of the moment. He had a sworn duty to uphold the law, but now the law felt like a cage around both of them. Lightning-fast memories struck Holloway, the names of black men who never made it home, Trayvon, Tamir, Eric. The eyewitness videos playing in his mind's eye, stoking a righteous fury. His mother's trembling voice, "Promise me you'll be easy to love, so they'll give you a chance." His father's solemn pride, "Carry yourself right, son, but know they may never see you for who you are." Now he felt both the weight of history and the fragility of the present. One wrong word, one wrong move, and it could all end here. He swallowed and spoke again, quieter. "Officer, I didn't do anything wrong. Let me show you my ID. I'm asking you politely." Delaney hesitated. His finger itched on the trigger, but something in Holloway's voice, a determined calm, cut through the fog of his fear. He lowered the weapon an inch. "ID," he repeated, voice cracking slightly. Carefully, Holloway extracted his Pentagon badge, an official identification bearing the eagle insignia, and held it out on the flat of his palm. Delaney glanced at the badge, at the engraved name, Brigadier General Jonathan Holloway. Time stopped. The suburban street seemed to hold its breath as the air between them crackled. Diverging destinies hinged on the next heartbeat. Officer Delaney stared at the badge in stunned silence. The heavy weight of the metal ID in Holloway's palm felt as though it might split open the world. Brigadier General Jonathan Holloway? He whispered, voice barely audible above the pounding of his own heart. Holloway nodded, his posture still pressed against the trunk of his silver sedan. Yes, sir. I lead the Army Cyber Command's Rapid Response Division. His breath came in measured increments, each exhale a small triumph over the fear that threatened to claim him. Delaney's finger slid away from the trigger. The pistol lowered, but his knuckles remained white around the grip. Reality rearranged itself in his mind. This was no common traffic stop, no ordinary suspect. He'd nearly committed the gravest mistake an officer could, using deadly force on a man whose only crime was existing in a body his brain had misread. Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Then Holloway spoke again, softer now. Officer, I understand you have a job to do, but I'd appreciate the chance to explain who I am. He indicated the badge. I have every clearance and credential. Delaney fumbled for his radio, voice trembling. Dispatch, this is Delaney on Poplar Ridge. I request backup and clarification. Subject is he hesitated, swallowing. A high-ranking Pentagon official. I need assistance, over. The dispatcher crackled back, confusion evident. Holloway's badge safely returned to his jacket pocket. Delaney holstered his weapon at last. The cop took a shuddering breath. Sir, are you going to be okay? He asked, his tone a mixture of regret and relief. Holloway straightened. Relief and anger warred on his face. He forced a calm exterior, though his mind still raced. I'm alive, he said simply. Holloway sank behind the wheel, hands trembling. He watched Delaney back away, calling in details as backup arrived. Night had fallen fully now, street lamps illuminating the scene in harsh white. He closed his eyes for a moment and let the shock wash over him. I almost died tonight, he thought. For a broken taillight. His mind cracked open, and memories poured out. Snapshots of a lifetime navigating a world bent by prejudice. Childhood afternoons in Charlotte helping his father grease the family's old Chevy. His father taught him to love hard and speak truth. But as they worked, he'd say, son, they'll judge you fast. Always faster than you can explain. High school hallways, the weight of stairs when he made the honor roll, whispers he must have cheated. He remembered the way the principal once called him into her office, commending his grades but warning about peers who might not take kindly to someone so different. His mother's prayers murmured at night, Lord, keep my boy safe. The world sees his color first, let them learn to see his heart. And then the stories, names that hung in the national conscience like specters. Eric Garner, whose last words, I can't breathe, were etched in bronze on protest signs and tear-streaked cheeks. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old playing in a Cleveland park, shot for carrying a toy gun. George Floyd, whose tragic end ignited cities on fire and hearts aflame. Holloway's anger simmered, a molten undercurrent in his chest. He clenched the steering wheel so hard his knuckles whitened. They never see us as whole people, he thought. Only as threats. But alongside that fury, a fragile thread of empathy emerged for the young officer trembling before him. Delaney hadn't meant to face down a general at gunpoint. He'd been ensnared by panic and bias. In that moment, both men were prisoners, one of prejudice, the other of systemic pressures that demanded officer safety above all. Delaney's voice crackled through the radio again, softer this time. Backup arrived, 2 cruisers pulling up. A sergeant approached, hands raised in peace, and Delaney nodded toward Holloway's car. The sergeant eyed the badge with astonishment. Within minutes, the scene was stabilized. Holloway handed over his ID to the sergeant and described the events with unwavering composure. He refused any immediate disciplinary action against Delaney. His priority was ensuring no one else suffered from the same near-tragic misunderstanding. As the officers spoke among themselves, Holloway sat alone, lights flashing around him like stalled fireworks. He took out his phone and thumbed through his contacts, considering who needed to know and who needed to listen. Across the street, Delaney stood beside his cruiser, head bowed. Unable to hold his composure any longer, Holloway walked over. Every footstep felt heavy with the weight of history and the potential for a different future. Officer, Holloway began, voice low. Delaney turned, eyes red-rimmed. I know you're shaken. He paused, searching the officer's face for defiance or remorse. Delaney nodded, unable to speak. This wasn't just a traffic stop. This was you and me, and every time someone like me gets out of a car alive, it's by luck, and by the grace of truth. He gestured to his badge. I'm telling you who I am, but more than that, I'm showing you that a human life is not a threat. Delaney swallowed. General Holloway. Sir, I'm so sorry. I've never been so scared in my life. I can't excuse it. His voice broke. I just reacted. Holloway saw the raw vulnerability in Delaney, the human side of the uniform. It didn't erase the fear he'd felt, but it opened a small door. We're all human, Holloway said. Fear isn't a crime, but when fear goes unchecked, it kills. It nearly killed me. Help me make sure it doesn't kill anyone else. Delaney exhaled sharply. I want to help, he said. Tell me how. Holloway offered a small, measured smile. By listening, he replied. By acknowledging your biases and working through them. By understanding what it means to walk in someone else's shoes. They stood there, the general and the cop, officers of different orders bound by an urgent purpose. Above them, the suburban night hummed, crickets, distant traffic, the faint pulse of community life. In that moment, distance between them shrank, two souls touched by a shared human truth. But the real battle would begin once the story spread, once the public reckoning kicked in. They both knew there would be outrage, scrutiny, second-guessing. Their private moment of recognition was just the prologue. Holloway locked eyes with Delaney. I have to make a call, he said quietly. One that will get everyone's attention and hopefully start a real conversation. He returned to his car, opened his phone, and paused on the Pentagon speed dial, a number reserved for emergencies. Delaney watched, breath bated. Holloway's finger hovered over the screen. In that stillness lay the power to shift the narrative entirely. Holloway's thumb pressed the familiar sequence, 703-695XXXX, the Pentagon's direct line. He steeled himself against the officer's gaze. This call would trigger a cascade of events neither of them could predict. Pentagon Command, Priority 1, barked a crisp voice on the first ring. General Jonathan Holloway speaking, Holloway said, voice resonant. He glanced at Delaney, whose face had gone pale. I need immediate assistance. I was just pulled over by Fairfax County PD, nearly shot. His words curved off into silence, the full weight of the evening's events hanging between them. General, the dispatcher said, we're marking this call for secure logs. Are you safe? The question crackled over the line with protocol precision. Safe for now, Holloway answered. But this was a high-risk stop. The officer drew his weapon without cause. Understood. We're dispatching a liaison to Fairfax PD. Stand by for immediate coordination. The line went dead. Delaney looked as though he might collapse. He lowered his head, pressing his palm to his forehead. Shit, he muttered. Holloway took a measured breath. This isn't about punishment, he said. It's about accountability and prevention. Within minutes, a sleek black sedan roared to the scene. Two uniformed military police officers emerged, crisp and professional. One, Captain Elena Cruz, stepped forward, her reporter's intuition visible in her stance. The other, Lieutenant Marcus Patel, bore the emblem of the Army's liaison to civil authorities. Delaney watched them approach, hands held high. Officer Delaney, Holloway called. Meet Captain Cruz and Lieutenant Patel from the Pentagon. They'll handle the investigation from here. Delaney extended a trembling hand. Officer. Delaney. I'm so sorry. Captain Cruz shuffled through a tablet. Tell us exactly what happened, she said, voice empathetic but businesslike. As Holloway recounted the stop, Delaney listened, shame and relief warring in his eyes. He nodded along, occasionally glancing at Cruz's screen as she logged details and geolocation data. Across the quiet block, the rumble of news helicopters began, early reports of Pentagon General pulled over at gunpoint. A local reporter's drone dipped low, capturing the flashing lights and converging forces. Holloway noticed the cameras before Delaney did, and he realized the personal moment was slipping into the public sphere. Captain Cruz, Holloway said, raising his voice so the reporters could hear. I'd like to request a formal joint statement, one that acknowledges the mistakes made tonight and pledges transparent reforms. Cruz looked to Patel, then back at Holloway. Agreed, she said. Lieutenant General O'Malley is already on her way. This will escalate quickly. Holloway nodded. He turned to Delaney. Stay here and cooperate fully. Tell the truth. That's how we rebuild trust. Delaney swallowed. Yes, sir. Thank you. General, by midnight, the story had ignited social media. Hashtags #StopDelaney and #GeneralUnderFire trended. Videos of the stop played on local news, edited to emphasize the drawn gun, the panicked faces. Memes sprang up, some mocking Delaney, others praising Holloway's composure. Fairfax County's mayor issued a brief statement promising an urgent review while civil rights groups filed FOIA requests. In the morning sun, community voices surged. At New Hope Baptist Church, Pastor Marcus Patel, no relation to the military lieutenant, stood beneath the steeple, flanked by activists and parents clutching protest signs. Tonight, he told the crowd, we're not just here for General Holloway. We're here for every black man who's had his life reduced to a threat. He lifted a photo collage of victims, Tamir, Eric, Brianna. Do you hear us? He shouted. The congregation echoed back, we hear you. Meanwhile, investigative reporter Elena Cruz dug into state records. She unearthed data showing that Fairfax PD officers had drawn weapons in 83 traffic stops over the past 2 years, and in 91% of those cases, the driver was a person of color. According to internal memos she obtained, Delaney himself had been involved in 3 prior stops where his officer safety justification masked incidents of excessive force. Cruz's expose ran on the 6 p.m. broadcast, graphics, and interviews painting a pattern of bias. At the town hall meeting in the county auditorium, the seats overflowed. White, black, Latino, and Asian faces filled the room in a tapestry of expectation and frustration. On the stage, a panel comprised of Holloway, Delaney, Pastor Patel, Captain Cruz, and local council members. Councilwoman Yvette Ramirez opened the forum. Tonight, we confront our community's demons, she said. We will listen. We will speak. And we will demand accountability. Delaney approached the microphone. His voice trembled at first, then steadied as he met Holloway's gaze. I was wrong, he admitted. My fear, my bias took over. I apologize to General Holloway, to this community, to anyone I've ever harmed. He paused, swallowing. I pledge to undergo rigorous bias training, to engage with this community, and to earn back your trust. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some skeptical, others hopeful. Holloway took the mic next. Officer Delaney had a choice tonight, he said. He chose to de-escalate. That same principle, the choice to see our shared humanity, must guide us all. He turned to the audience. This is not about one man's mistake. It's about systems that allow prejudice to fester. I'm calling on this community to partner with the military, law enforcement, and civil rights advocates to build lasting reform. A murmur rippled through the hall. Outside, cameras captured every nod and frown. Later, in a quiet hallway, Elena Cruz approached Holloway. Your story is powerful, she said. But people need data, context, actions. I want to do a deep dive piece on how this collaboration could reshape policing nationwide. Will you help me? Holloway nodded. I will, he said. We need to move beyond this one incident. As the town meeting adjourned, clusters of conversations formed. Some clashes, some handshakes, and above all, a sense that this moment could be a turning point. But the deepest work would happen behind closed doors, where policies, negotiations, and power struggles unfold away from public view. When dawn broke over the Potomac River the next morning, the Pentagon's massive limestone facade gleamed with the promise of accountability. Inside the Pentagon Command Center, Lieutenant General Grace O'Malley reviewed the preliminary report on the Fairfax County traffic stop. A mixture of disbelief and resolve shadowed her features. She tapped her pen on the dossier's cover. This could have been a national tragedy, she muttered, eyes narrowing. Major Douglas Shaw, head of internal affairs for the Army, stood at attention. Ma'am, our initial inquiry confirms that Officer Delaney drew his weapon without sufficient cause. His report cites officer safety concerns, but video evidence and witness statements contradict his justification. O'Malley exhaled, folding her arms. Prepare a full-scale joint investigation with the Department of Defense Office of General Counsel, the Army Inspector General, and Fairfax County's Civil Rights Division. I want every policy, every radio transcript, every training record on my desk by end of week. Below them, staffers mobilized. Captain Elena Cruz coordinated with Pentagon IT to secure Holloway's call logs and the body camera footage. Lieutenant Marcus Patel liaised with the Virginia Attorney General's Civil Rights Unit, ensuring that the military, police, and state investigators shared evidence unredacted. The mood felt both urgent and somber. This was not merely a personnel matter, but a critical test of the military's ability to hold civilian law enforcement to account when national security figures were involved. Across the hall, Delaney arrived for his first interview with Major Shaw. His uniform was crisp, but his shoulders slumped under the weight of impending consequences. He entered a sparse conference room where Shaw and a Civil Rights Division attorney, Susan Park, waited. Officer Delaney, Major Shaw began. We've reviewed the footage. You'll have the opportunity to explain your actions. But know this, drawing your weapon without an imminent threat is a serious violation of department policy, and potentially criminal. Why did you not issue a verbal warning or request backup before escalating? Delaney exhaled shakily. Sir, I panicked. When I saw a black man alone at night, I let my training and fears override my judgment. I thought I was protecting myself, but I realized now I endangered another life. Park leaned forward. That admission is critical. We'll evaluate whether your actions warrant criminal charges or administrative sanctions. Meanwhile, the Army will proceed with its own disciplinary review to determine any breaches of the Uniform Code of Military Justice in terms of conduct involving military personnel on U.S. soil. Delaney nodded, face pale. I accept whatever comes. I'll do whatever it takes, retraining, counseling, community service, to make amends. Meanwhile, General Holloway convened a high-level meeting with his own staff in his Pentagon office. Sunlight filtered through the blinds as he laid out the strategic vision. This incident exposed a dangerous gap. Military personnel, even at the highest levels, remain vulnerable to biased policing. We can't simply issue an apology. We must build bridges. His chief of staff, Colonel Denise Alvarez, piped up. Sir, I recommend launching a pilot program pairing cyber command leadership with local law enforcement. Implicit bias training co-developed by military psychologists and community advocates along with regular ride-alongs so officers see the humanity behind the badge and the uniform. Holloway nodded, steepling his fingers. Good. And I want a memorandum of understanding with Fairfax County PD outlining transparent data sharing, stops involving military-credentialed personnel, use of force incidents, and follow-up assessments. Let's set measurable goals, reduced complaints, increased trust metrics, community survey results. At the State Capitol building, the Civil Rights Division hosted a press conference. Attorney General Nicole Simmons stood at the podium flanked by Captain Cruz and Pastor Marcus Patel. Today, Simmons announced, we open a civil rights investigation into Fairfax County Police Department practices. We will audit all traffic stops over the past 5 years for racial disparities. No department is above scrutiny. Flashbulbs popped as reporters scribbled notes. Back at Fairfax PD headquarters, Chief of Police Darren Hughes addressed his command staff in the roll call room. He'd been up all night reviewing memos from the Pentagon and the Attorney General's office. Team, he began, voice gravelly, we are at a crossroads. One of our officers nearly caused an international incident. That is on me. Effective immediately, Officer Mark Delaney is suspended pending retraining, and we're instituting department-wide implicit bias workshops. We'll choose local experts and representatives from the Black community to lead these sessions. A hush fell over the room. Traffic enforcement officers, detectives, administration personnel, none had heard policies shift so dramatically overnight. Hughes continued, I expect full cooperation with all investigations. We owe our community transparency and respect. This is our chance to rebuild trust. Meanwhile, grassroots groups mobilized. Community organizer Terry Nguyen posted flyers announcing a police reform workshop at the local library. Young activists updated a crowdsourced Google Sheet cataloging incidents of perceived police misconduct, awaiting the Fairfax PD data audit. In churches, mosques, and synagogues, interfaith councils planned a solidarity march to support accountability for all. By the week's end, preliminary findings dropped. Fairfax PD officers stopped black drivers at twice the rate of white drivers, and the use of weapons in traffic stops was disproportionately high against people of color. The department issued an official apology and unveiled a road to reform blueprint. Mandatory bias training for all 600 officers, real-time oversight by a newly established civilian review board, and body camera live streaming to a neutral third party. Lieutenant General O'Malley stood in the Pentagon courtyard for an interview with CNN. This is more than one officer's error, she told the camera. It's a symptom of systemic issues that demand coordinated solutions, civilian and military, federal and local. We'll use every tool at our disposal to ensure dignity and equality under the law. The clip went viral, spawning conversations from Capitol Hill to kitchen tables across America. In the center of these efforts, James Holloway reflected on the whirlwind. He'd expected gratitude for his restraint, but what he discovered was a deeper transformation. The machinery of power could bend toward justice, but only when individuals chose accountability over denial. He picked up the phone to call Delaney, now undergoing sensitivity training at the State Academy, to offer support and guidance. Delaney answered, voice tentative. General, sir, I've been in sessions all week. I've learned more about systemic bias, empathy, and the weight of my badge than in years on patrol. Holloway smiled, imagining the man's earnest tone. Good, he said. Now let's plan that joint training program. I want to see community leaders, law enforcement, and military liaisons in the same room. Sharing, listening, growing. Delaney hesitated, then said, "Yes, sir." "I'd be honored." As they spoke, the morning light rose higher, illuminating a world poised between its troubled past and a potentially fairer future. The accountability process, arduous, painful, essential, was underway, and neither power nor prejudice could stop its course. The community forum was held in the spacious fellowship hall of New Hope Baptist months after the traffic stop incident. Folding chairs filled the floor in neat rows. A modest stage at the front held a long table draped in blue cloth, behind which sat 5 faces that symbolized the journey from confrontation to cooperation. Moderator Elena Cruz opened the session. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Tonight, we bring together voices that rarely share the same table: a Pentagon General, a suburban police officer, faith leaders, activists, and you, the community. Our hope is to transform a moment of fear into a movement of solidarity." Panelist 1. Brigadier General Jonathan Holloway. He sat tall, in civilian attire now, but the weight of his rank and experience was evident in his measured presence. "That night under the streetlight," he recalled, "I nearly became a statistic, but instead of tragedy, we chose dialogue." He paused, looking out over the audience. Justice isn't served only by holding people accountable. It's built by listening, learning, and partnering across divides. Panelist 2. Officer Mark Delaney. Next to Holloway, Delaney's uniform was replaced by a simple shirt and tie, no badge on his chest, but humility in his eyes. He cleared his throat. "I made a mistake that could have cost a life," he said. "I wish I could change the past, but I've embraced my responsibility to change the future." With General Holloway's guidance and the community's patience, I've learned more about implicit bias, systemic racism, and empathy than ever before. Panelist 3. Pastor Marcus Patel. The pastor stood, his gentle baritone resonating through the hall. "Accountability must be paired with redemption," he said. "We cannot condemn Officer Delaney and then abandon him. Nor can we celebrate General Holloway's survival without demanding the same respect for every black driver. Tonight, we call for both justice and healing." Panelist 4. Councilwoman Yvette Ramirez. She spoke of the Civilian Review Board's successes. "In the 6 months since our inception, complaints against Fairfax PD have decreased by 30% and community satisfaction surveys have risen by 45%. But data alone doesn't fix hearts. That's why our new initiative, Bridges of Trust, partners law enforcement with local nonprofits, schools, and faith groups." Panelist 5. Lieutenant Marcus Patel, Pentagon Liaison. He outlined the military's co-developed training modules, using scenarios drawn from real traffic stops, like the one involving General Holloway and Officer Delaney. We train officers and soldiers together. We emphasize de-escalation, cultural competency, and shared humanity. Early pilots show increased understanding and fewer use-of-force incidents. As the formal presentations concluded, Cruz opened the floor for questions. A young black mother raised her hand, tears glistening. "My son is 10, she said. He asks why police sometimes see him as scary. What promise can you make that his life won't be overshadowed by fear?" Officer Delaney swallowed. "I promise you and your son that I will carry his name with me every time I get behind the wheel. The training I've undergone, the conversations I've had, will guide every decision. I will see him as a child first, not a threat." General Holloway leaned forward. "And I pledge that the military will continue to share resources, data, and expertise to support community-centered policing. This partnership is not a one-time event, it's a covenant." A ripple of applause swept the room, then turned into a standing ovation. Faces of every background rose in unison, an emblem of unity forged from crisis. Systemic injustice thrives when fear and prejudice go unchecked. Tonight's forum reminds us that progress demands both courage and humility, courage to confront uncomfortable truths and humility to accept that no one is beyond reproach. When we hold institutions accountable and forge unlikely alliances, we transform moments of crisis into catalysts for change. No single encounter will erase centuries of bias. But each decision, to lower a weapon instead of raising it, to speak with curiosity rather than judgment, to build bridges instead of walls, brings us closer to justice. Remember, every person's humanity matters, and lasting reform grows from empathy, transparency, and collective action. What role will you play? Will you listen when someone shares their truth? Will you stand up when you witness injustice? Will you join hands with those whose experiences differ from your own? One near miss. 2 lives forever changed. If the story hit you, smash like, share it, and subscribe for more narratives that hold power to account. Speech balloon in the comments. What would you do in General Holloway's or Officer Delaney's shoes? Dialogue or division? Your voice decides.